Hey, it's April, and today I'm going to be making Sailor Cosmos. Well, sort of. This one is actually a commission from a while back. The request was to create Sailor Cosmos, but in my own style rather than an exact copy of the character. I decided to approach it with a sort of sci-fi vibe. I really love the aesthetic of androids and like the Megami device figures you can get and stuff, so I took some loose inspiration from that, and this is what I came up with. So let's get started. I'm using a G3 monsterhigh Spectra as the base, removing the factory paint with pure acetone, cutting off the hair, and then dunking the head in boiling water so it's nice and soft and easy to remove. I can then scrape out all the remaining plugs with some tweezers. Squish the head back on and it's ready to paint. I'm using acrylics to give her a pale skin tone, but leaving the shoulders white and also painting the hands and forearms white to kind of mimic cap sleeves and gloves. Plus this way I don't need to worry about the joints chipping, which is super handy. Once the paint dries, I can sketch a face with pencils. Fill in the eyes with white acrylic. Add some irises. And paint the base for her lashes. Add some pupils. Then blush with soft pastels. I'm sticking with soft neutrals and pink shades. I just want to add some depth and life to her face whilst keeping things looking natural. Well, as natural as my style gets anyway. I'm also trying to rely on just the pastels and pencils more with this one. Most of the time I go straight in with acrylics, but since I want a really soft look with this one, I thought it would be best to avoid that as it's more bold and graphic. Well, except for the lashes, of course. I'm using greys to darken the irises to try and get that silvery blue. And then a pop of bright blue under the pupil. Add some blush into the body, especially to blend the white areas into the skin tone. And some highlights to her face. I'm using brown paint for the smile line. And then building up the colours and shading after spraying with more MSC. Adding the white highlights with paint is probably my favourite part of the face up. Whilst it can be pretty tricky to get clean lines, I think they really bring the face to life. She's a magical character, so of course I had to add lots of sparkles. And now to make her lashes extra fluffy. Since her hair is white, I'm going to add some grey and white into the lashes, and I'm aiming for a sort of dreamy expression, so I'm going to go quite heavy with the downward facing lashes. But I'm trying to make sure they're not too thick, keeping them like nice and sketchy and flicky. It just looks a bit less aggressive than the really thick graphic ones. Now that the face is pretty much finished, I can paint the legs without worrying about scratching them. For the finishing touches, I'm coating her eyes and lips with Duraclear gloss varnish, painting the gold star on her forehead, and the one on her chest too. That's her face and body finished, so that means it's time to make her an outfit. I drew a template for the stockings and marked off the different layers. It seemed easier than sewing them as one piece. I'd want to be able to layer them instead. Cut the pieces out of a mesh and white stretchy fabric, stitched together, and now they can be layered onto the doll. For the bodysuit, I did the same again and split it into different layers. Cut the pieces from the same white fabric, stitched together, and that's it for the clothes. But we still need the many accessories, starting with the wings. I rolled out a blob of Apoxie Sculpt, and then using a wing template that I drew, I cut the shape out. Define the edges and marked a line for the top wing on the inside. And then positioned on the doll to make sure that it cures in the correct shape. Once fully cured, I can just pop them off. I did the same thing for all the other wings. Since I find that you have to wait for the epoxy to be quite dry before you can properly roll it out and cut out shapes like this, it's left them quite messy and rough looking, so I'm going to clean them up with some sanding. Once everything's nice and smooth, it's ready to be painted with acrylics. I'm going with a simple glossy white look to match the original design. And I also thought it matches the sci-fi vibe as well, like kind of almost like the armor or something. Next, she needs an armoured skirt. So I drew the template for the holographic vinyl pieces and for the transparent warbler pieces as well, and then cut out the shapes. To make sure the pieces sit correctly on the doll, I'm heating them up with my heat gun and then gently pressing them into place. Once everything was the correct shape, I then painted the warbler pieces with some acrylic paint. This is my version of the multicoloured stripes on the skirt from the original design. I decided to go with pastel shades because I thought it'd fit my pale aesthetic a bit better than the really bright rainbow colours. I just couldn't really make that work, it seemed odd. It probably seems daft to be using transparent warbler when I'm just covering them with paint, but it's because unlike all the other types, it has a completely smooth surface. This way I don't need to mess around doing all the prepping and priming that I would have if I'd used the opaque types. It just saves a lot of time. Now to make them glossy like the wings, I'm going to coat them in some UV resin. Not only does it give the best shine, but it's also going to protect the shape and the paint job, and we always appreciate extra durability. That's all the big pieces sorted and looking nice and shiny, so onto all the little gems and things. I found these really pretty flat back gems to use, but I want them to look a bit glassier, so I'm adding a resin dome on top. It's not a huge difference, but personally I much prefer the rounded shape and the extra shine. I'm also painting a couple of them for the gems with stars. Trying to get opaque white on something like this is painfully tedious, so instead I did a rainbow base and I only took one coat of white on top of that. I added the gold star, lots of shimmer, and then coated with more UV resin. And that's the gem for a chest, and the gem for a waist. But before I start assembling things, she needs some shoes. So I'm cutting up the stock shoes, as the main part is the perfect base shape, I just don't need all the straps and the ball heels. To extend the front piece, I'm using hot glue to attach toothpicks to the hole I made. This will provide an anchor for the clay to stick to, and it will also ensure that both shoes are the exact same height. As always, I'm sculpting them with epoxy. It can get kind of frustrating trying to force the clay into more geometric shapes, so I'm leaving them a little bit messy and chunky, and then I can sand them down into the right shape later. And once they're nice and smooth, I painted them white and sealed with gloss varnish. Now it's time to start assembling. First, I filled the shoe with glue and then pushed her foot into place. Then took these awesome rainbow beads for the heels. On my mock-up, I actually had these as gold, but I loved the rainbow look on these beads so much that I just couldn't bring myself to paint them, and instead I'm adding a second mini bead in the gold colour. I attached the wings with hot glue and gems. They look pretty different to my mock-up, but I actually much prefer this version. I think sometimes it's better to just go with the flow rather than strictly sticking to a plan. I used hot glue to attach the rainbow skirt. The hollow skirt. And the collar too. Then all the wings and all the gems. You will probably notice in the photos that I did end up adding more later on as well. To cover up the top edge of the skirt, I took a strip of the white fabric and glued it in place. It helped make the skirt look like it was actually part of the outfit as well, rather than just stuck on. I also noticed that in the original design, she has little pearl rings on her fingers, so I'm gluing on these cute little iridescent beads as a nod to that. And then to finish off, I gave her some big chunky earrings too. Couldn't decide if I preferred the collar popped or flat. It's more sailor-like flat, but it kind of adds some drama when it's popped. Now onto the staff. I took one of the rainbow beads and pressed two of the epoxy wings into place. Popped them off. Sanded smooth. Painted them white and coated in gloss. I also painted a couple of beads in gold. So for the top gem with the star, I need to make it myself, but I didn't have a proper mould. I do, however, have a pop fidget toy, and I think I can make that work. I flooded 2 half spheres with some resin, popped the bubbles, and cured. As you can tell, it didn't work at all. They're a total mess. I don't know why I tried to fill something so deep with UV resin that's obviously never going to work, But on my second attempt, doing it in 3 separate layers, they came out great. I also added glitter to one half to make it more magical looking. I sanded them down a little and then added some more resin just to make them more spherical. I painted the gold star on the back of the clear one. And then stuck the halves together with resin. And attached an acrylic rod so that I can easily hold it whilst filling in that seam so everything's nice and smooth. I'm so pleased with the result, it looks really pretty. To assemble the staff, I glued the wings back onto the bead and attached that to the acrylic rod. Slid the smaller gold bead into place. Trim down the acrylic on the top bead so that it slots into place, and fixed with glue. Stuck the bottom beads together and then attached them to the staff. You can sort of see the seam where I extended the rod, so I painted a couple of gold bands on for decoration. And now she has a staff. So, onto the very last thing, her wig. I took some chunky white yarn, brushed it into wefts, and then glued those directly to the wig cap. Starting with the part line, so I'm placing them upside down and then I can just flip them over later when they're fully dried. Filled in the sides, bringing the wefts up to the point where the buns will sit. Fold over the part line pieces and repeat on the other side. To cover the edges of the cap, I removed it and then glued the hair to the inside. And then pulled them up and fixed in place. I then filled in the front for a fringe. And cut and styled. A lot of people ask what I use to fix the hair in place. It's just clear drying tacky glue mixed into some boiling water. To shape the strands into flicks, I'm using this little iron. I honestly don't know what it is or what its actual purpose is. I just saw it and thought it looked useful, so I bought it. And it is great for styling these wigs. To make the heart buns, I cut out the shape from some cotton fabric, sewed them together, and stuffed with the leftover fluff from brushing out the yarn. Glued the bottoms closed and then wrapped with hair. For the pigtails, I took a length of twisted wire and wrapped with more of the fluff. Secured with thread. And wrapped in cotton fabric, and then glued the wefts into place. It would have been quicker and easier to use some of the long synthetic doll hair you can get, but personally, I just really hate working with this stuff. It feels like a constant battle, and I actually prefer the look of the brushed yarn. It holds its shape, which means it's perfect for simulating movement in photos. Plus, as someone who used to backcomb my own hair to death, I'm a really big fan of fluffy hair. I made sure to leave a loop in the top of the wire so that I can use that to sew the pigtails directly to the wig cap. I used some OOAK glue just to make sure they're extra secure. And then bent them into shape. It's kind of fun that they're posable, to be honest. And then attach the little heart buns with glue. And that's the finished wig. Well, minus the accessories, of course. So let's check out the finished look. I hope you've enjoyed seeing my interpretation of Sailor Cosmos, and remember, if you want to see more of my characters come to life, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.